Let's talk about Gevurah. Gevurah is the fifth Sephira on the Tree of Life, ruled by the planet Mars and associated with the color red. If you read about Gevurah and what it means on the Tree of Life, and you read some books that are a little bit older, you find that people associate it with war and destruction and cruelty and all kinds of unpleasant things. And so it makes you kind of wary of Gevurah. But it's important to remember that those things, war and destruction, all of that, that happens down here on Earth. That doesn't happen in Gevurah itself. It doesn't happen when you're there on the Tree of Life. It can happen as a result of going through that if you respond to it badly, for example. But it's not the nature of Gevurah itself. The nature of Gevurah is pure and it is discipline. Gevurah, Mars in Gevurah loves through discipline and by keeping things under control, telling you no when it's good to stop. And you can see that in the progression of the tarot cards from the 4s to the 5s. We looked at Chesed in the previous video. So let's look at the 5s and then back at the 4s and see how that progression works. So here we have the 4 5s. We have the 5 of Wands, 5 of Cups, 5 of Swords, and the 5 of Discs. And these cards are all very challenging cards. They have very challenging names. We have strife, we have disappointment, we have defeat, and we have worry. So with the Thoth Tarot, with these card titles, they can be a little bit alarming. I like to read them as warnings of what can go wrong, basically, because Gevurah is a challenging place to be. You can tell, even without looking at the titles of the cards, you can see that these are challenging cards. The pictures are all kind of distressing. What's interesting about these 3, I would say, is that they are all upside down stars. And when you have an upside down star, the message is you need to turn things around. You've got your priorities wrong. You've got your priorities in earthly things. Because if you think about a star, a 5-pointed star, usually the main point is at the top, and that is spirit. That point is spirit. And so when you have an upside down triangle like this, you have spirit kind of being buried in the earth. So the thing to do in these cards is to think about how to turn things around. And particularly with the 5 of Swords, the colors in this card, this is the only card that has these colors except from the star. They're both Aquarius cards, so I associate them with each other. And particularly, I think of the 5 of Swords as an upside down star. And you can even see in the colors here, the purples and the pinks are the star's colors, and the green at the bottom is Venus. So you have, and Venus is associated with Netzach, which is further down the Tree of Life. So you've got your head buried in the ground. And you can even see at the bottom of the card, the bottom sword down there has a hilt that looks like a crown. So your head in the ground there. So you want to turn these right side up somehow. So let's look at how the progression works for Hesed. And remember that Hesed is about loving kindness and generosity. So giving and providing, but it has to find a limit. So for example, if we have the freewheeling, whoops, wrong one. We have the freewheeling 4 of Wands, and then we come into the 5 of Wands. Well, you can see how if this was left on its own, you know what things do when they're spinning. Sometimes if there's nothing to stop them, if there's no resistance, it just spins and spins and spins, and maybe it gets faster and faster and out of control. So here Mars is saying, okay, that's enough. Let's stop this before it starts destroying things. The same thing with the 4 of Cups. Now, as I say, the Thoth Tarot is really about warning you about things that might happen if you don't get it under control. So 5s, you can also look at the 5s as an opportunity for adjustment. 4s are a pause. Chesed is a place where you pause, but you have to move on to Gevurah and adjust things. So here you have an adjustment. Luxury can very easily turn into self-absorption. I always think of Narcissus with the 5 of the Five of Cups, because yes, things might not be great with the Five of Cups, but there is an element of overdoing it a little bit, over dramatizing things, and that can happen with the Four of Cups. You can be thinking about your relationships a little bit too much and getting yourself too involved in your earthly concerns. So you want to flip this card around so that the upper part of the star is facing toward the top. With the Swords, okay, if you stay in the Four of Swords too long, you're thinking, and you're not doing anything. So your head is, you're too much in your head. And with the Four of Discs, well, if you stay in one place too much, if you stay isolated too much, if you're overprotected, you do start to worry, don't you? And there is also the element of the story about the wealthy person who has tons and tons of money, and then the problem becomes keeping it. So you start building up walls around yourself, walls around your possessions to protect them. And one of the things that wealth brings is a worry about wealth, worrying about keeping it. So you can see then that with the Five, it's sort of a natural progression, but you want to prevent this. So you're working between the two. Chesed and Gevurah are a pair. You're working between the two, so you might want to go back to Chesed. And this is one of the ways that I work on the Tree of Life. If I get a card like worry, I think, well, what was before it? And maybe, that caused it. On the Tree of Life, it's always moving, they're always interacting, so look to this for what caused that and where to go next. And if you look at where to go next, you get some encouragement. So you have the Four of Wands, then you have the Five of Wands, but you want to get through there because the next one is the Six of Wands in Tiferet, which is beautiful. So you can see that from this freewheeling success, completion, that might get out of control. If you stop it for a second, then it falls into this beautiful, perfectly balanced shape. And finally, we look at the majors. So Chesed, we looked at the Emperor, and for Gevurah, we can look at the Hierophant, number 5. So what happens in between these two? Well, you go from generosity and ruling and moving ahead and really going to get things and taking control to a more internal energy, maybe listening to a higher source. And that is part of Gevurah, is listening to a higher source, listening to your intuition, listening to teachings before you move forward. Because after Gevurah, the path that leads you to Tiferet is adjustment. So you're adjusting things. You're taking everything that you learned in both of these Sephira, and you're taking it forward, and you're adjusting as you go. So that's a lot of what Gevurah is about, is about adjusting. So I hope that was interesting. Let me know if you have any comments or questions, and I'll see you in the next video.